right, welcome, welcome. Come on in, everyone. We have another exciting week, another exciting episode ahead of us. Welcome back, welcome back. As everyone continues to log in today, I'll get started by introducing myself. Um, my name is Marlo Brooks. I am a senior studying English in the College of Arts and Letters here at CSUSB, and I'm joined by my co-host, Yvette.
Hi, I'm Yvette Relias. I am also a student at CSUSB studying communication and environmental sciences. So thank you all for being a part of the conversation again.
Right. And again, welcome back. Welcome back. So today we have another special event today for you guys. And it's going to be done a little different if you weren't here in the past weeks. We're going to introduce a short film today that we're going to discuss throughout this community, throughout this episode, throughout this series. Um, so we definitely want you to stay tuned. Take as many notes or any questions you may have during this segment. You can post them down in our Q&A slide at the bottom of your screen. And even if it doesn't pertain to the film itself, if you have any questions that you may want to answer to or on our panelists to dive into for you, we're more than welcome to do so. As you know, we start our show off with giving our acknowledgments and paying our respects to the land on which we sit on. We, as in CSUSB, the campus itself. So we recognize that the California State University of San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the California State University of San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use of the occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold CSUSB more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. So thank you. So I'm gonna pass things over to my co-host Yvette. Well, she will be talking about recent events. Yvette.
Thank you, Marlo. So this past week, the Human Rights Council mandated that the UN, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the special procedures to assist them give a report on systemic racism and law enforcement agencies' violations of international human rights law against Africans and people of African descent. The hope is that there's a greater sense of accountability ascribed to nations to increase their efforts against historically pervasive phenomenon of systemic racism, as well as justly acknowledge and compensate victims and survivors of systemic racism and police brutality. This is great news for the world and great news for human beings in general. As far as America, the most it does is puts pressure on the United States, but there is no mandated action since the Trump administration withdrew America from the Human Rights Council in 2018, because the Trump administration doesn't care about human rights, obviously.
Tell it.
Also, this last week, or rather our last episode, we gave some updates on what was going on in Portland.
Tell it, Yvette.
So,
Tell it.
Basically, in Portland, we've got military federal agencies assaulting citizens, tear gassing citizens. After weeks of peaceful protests, they were peaceful for weeks before government agencies came in. You may have even seen Bill Barr, the Attorney General, belittle the situation, and he even defended the concept of a military police state, which is what's happening in Portland. He did this during yesterday's House Judiciary Committee hearing, but this week, the council passed several bills in an attempt to mitigate the chances of another Portland happening. One of the approved bills requires officers to intervene in situations when fellow officers use inappropriate force or when fellow officers knowingly deprive any person of any constitutionally or statutorily guaranteed right. And I know that this segment is really supposed to be for good news, but I have to say that I look a lot for police brutality cases that end in vindication and police brutality legislation that gives vindication to people of color. But I will say that I see a lot more police brutality legislation because, as you know, this country is all words and all papers and no action. So, but definitely stay in the fight, stay in the streets, keep getting in good trouble for good causes. And that's all I'm gonna say. Dr. Mark Robinson is here to introduce the film today, so I'm gonna pass things off to him.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. And thank you for keeping us updated with these late breaking and new things happening in our country. So the film that we have for today is a little bit different than what we've been doing thus far. So I want to just give a couple of brief comments as we get started here, right? So the film is called Black America Since MLK. And so overall, it's a film series where it talks about really from 1968 when Dr. King was murdered until more or less the present, kind of what's been happening in the United States, particularly as it pertains to African Americans. Today we're going to watch the 4th episode in that 4-part series, so the final episode. And so what we're going to see today is really from Hurricane Katrina to Black Lives Matter, a series of events and major developments in American history. And so on that regard, it's not exactly tied to race and policing as much as our conversation has been thus far, right? So in that sense, it's a bit of a departure. But I would encourage us to think of it as related in the sense that it's going to provide us some of the background information to kind of help us unpack and to help us to think about what's going on in this moment. Right, so for example, as I mentioned, it talks about Hurricane Katrina right at the very beginning, an incident that perhaps is worth remembering what happened and kind of what that looked like and what that told us about our nation. From there, it talks about Barack Obama and his election. And so there's this one memorable moment where you'll see Oprah Winfrey and others reacting to that moment and thinking, wow, something really important is happening, something really monumental has shifted with that election. And then it goes on from there to talk about some of the other both positives and negatives, kind of highs and lows that we see within African American history and US history related to African Americans in the following years. Of course, that is also going to include the issue of police misconduct, issues of excessive force, and protests against it. And so as we get towards the end, we'll definitely see some of those more focused conversations more related to what we've been talking about thus far. But going back to the Obama example as just a indication of the larger conversation that we're having, and the way in which this film kind of comments. If we would think back to 2008, when Barack Obama was elected and we saw Oprah Winfrey and Jesse Jackson and all these other folks reacting, and as well as our own reactions, there was a sense of, wow, something really important has happened in our country. And what I think the film is trying to get us to think about, and what I would also encourage us to think about, is that there was something really important and really impactful happening, but it probably wasn't as clear as it may have seemed, right? Because at the time, there was a lot of feeling about maybe we're post-racial now, maybe we've gotten past these racial issues, and this is an important moment of progress. And in a certain sense, it was, but in a certain sense, it also was part of what we understand today in the current Trump administration and what we kind of see as the kind of aftermath or the after effects of how some in our society reacted to our president, President Obama, and now we have President Trump, right? And so thinking about how these things are connected together in this broader sweep of history, this broader swath of time, I think the film is really useful in kind of helping us see that. And so as it kind of lays out this overview of the last 15, 20 years, I think it's important to kind of keep it in mind as providing us some of that background information that can then inform our ongoing conversation about, well, what do we do about policing now? What do we think about unarmed African Americans being killed or being abused by law enforcement now, criminal justice reform, and so forth. So after we watch the film, we'll have some time for Q&A as we usually do. Some of the panelists and I will offer some additional comments. And so we'll have another opportunity to think about more, what does this film tell us that's useful, and how does it relate to our ongoing conversation on race and policing? So with that being said, we'll go ahead and start the film.
Please give to your PBS station. I turned on the television and couldn't believe my eyes. Hurricane Katrina had hit New Orleans, catastrophically damaging antiquated levees and flooding 80% of the city. Nearly 100,000 people found themselves stranded, without food or shelter, in a rising tide of deadly water. And it looked like almost all of them were black. It was agonizing to watch.
All of those black folks stranded on rooftops, waving American flags, came floating through the television screen. And it was a stark moment, because here we are in the 21st century, and black people are still having to make the case to their country that they are citizens and therefore worthy of being rescued.
You got a 3-week-old infant out here. How is a 3-week-old infant gonna be able to survive out here with no milk, no water?
We need medical attention. They got old people that's sick. They got people dying in there.
Katrina laid bare the unfinished work of the civil rights movement.
We are in desperate need, and we are Americans. It is terrible.
Revealing the deep vulnerability of the poorest black communities and making it painfully clear that race remained a decisive factor in American life.
I was in such shock. Why were so many of the people black and poor? Because when you're black and poor, you're the most disenfranchised. And that's why.
The Hurricane Katrina spectacle was really what it was. Devastating, tragic, horrific, revealed the great divide that we know is there and, we don't talk about, but for anyone to say that it wasn't disregard based on race and class is to be disingenuous about what we all saw.
People are dying. They're dying. Babies are dying.
The disaster was compounded by the government's slow response, which seemed to express a deep indifference to the victims. 2 days after the storm, President Bush finally came to view the devastation from the safety of Air Force One, never even setting foot in the city. While on the ground, the casualties and the chaos were mounting.
They tell us if you want to be rescued, go to the Superdome. All of a sudden, now they're telling us go to the bridge. We have very few resources. What are we supposed to do?
Tonight, the real concern is looting.
Relief efforts were also hampered by the media's lurid stories of crime sprees in the flood zone, which isolated the victims even further. Desperate, hundreds of black people attempted to escape on their own by walking to suburbs across the river. They were stopped by police officers and local residents with rifles.
The people in surrounding areas armed themselves to prevent Black New Orleans residents from getting out of the city. That is a direct kind of metaphor for what had been happening in American cities. White people who've managed to escape and literal barriers to black people getting out of the cities and going to where they are.
You had to do what you had to do. You know, you had to shoot somebody, you had to shoot somebody. We shot them.
They were looters. In this neighborhood, we take care of our own.
So how could this be? How could race relations have been so bad, leading to such disastrous consequences?
I think it's hard for America to see this poor black mass, this poor black mass of people. People are scared of that. Mm-hmm. They don't know what to do with that. They just don't. So we're still grappling with how to see us as whole human beings, as whole people.
Tremaine Lee, a young journalist, stayed in the city throughout the disaster, trying to report what was actually happening.
Thousands of people gathered here. Children, folks who needed medicine, families with nowhere else to go.
Why weren't people bringing food or medical supplies?
Those early days, there's so many rumors of rape and murder and mayhem. And because we're dealing with poor black people, it seemed plausible, right? See, the officials say, like, what are we going to do? They're killing each other.
Right, so these were the stereotypes.
The stereotypes.
People being victimized by stereotypes of themselves, and all they wanted to do was survive.
That's right. We talk about these young thugs, these young guys with their dreadlocks and their pants hanging down off their behinds. They were breaking in places and getting medicine for old people.
Really?
They were breaking in and getting food for people. They were keeping people safe.
Somehow that wasn't reported on my television.
That wasn't reported because the image, the optics of this scary black mass of looters, right?
And if you stereotype them, that gets you off the hook.
Oh, that's right.
We would help them, but they're just animals.
Because they were poor and black, and who cares, right? We've seen that time and again, that who cares about them?
I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food.
After 4 excruciating days, rapper Kanye West, on a telethon for Katrina's victims, suddenly blurted out what many of us were feeling.
The most tragic loss of all. George Bush doesn't care about black people.
I see Kanye West, who says, George Bush doesn't care about black people. My mouth dropped. I was stunned.
He's talking about our government. He's talking about the office of the president. And he's right. Government doesn't care about black people, right? How could you think they did in the moment where we're looking at Katrina?
Katrina revealed America at its worst, at its most callous, its most racist, but it didn't reveal America in its entirety. Our nation still had the capacity to surprise. Days after the flooding, an official delegation visited evacuees in Houston, Texas.
What's your name, sweetie?
Among the visitors was America's only black senator, Barack Obama.
The emergency response.
Final episode of that series. If you do want to catch that series to its entirety, down in the chat, you will find that link to watch that series in its entirety. But that episode alone was just enough to for us to sit here and unpack for you today. We all know the year of 2008 was a very, very interesting, very moving, life-moving, very to the front line year for many Americans, because it brought a lot of subjects, a lot of subject matter, a lot of content, a lot of ways that we've been feeling. It brought it to the forefront, which is what you see us a lot now in 2020. with racial biases and just the issue on race alone being the main topic and the main course that we hear about throughout our day to day. So I am going to pass things over to Mark Robinson for a second, Professor Mark Robinson. He's going to lead us into our today's Q&A. So Mark.
Okay, thank you, Marlo. So yeah, I mean, picking up just kind of where you left off, as we think about the film, definitely a lot to unpack, a lot to think about as we then keep in mind our conversation around policing that we have going on for today. You also mentioned that for people who want to see this video again or other films in the series, it's available for free through the Pfau library on campus. So you can watch it online if you go through the regular search function and search for the title of the film, Black America Since MLK. You can find it that way. I'm sure if you reached out to the library staff, I'm sure they could also help connect you. So wanted to plug the library for their great resources. And then, yeah, I mean, thinking about the film, so there's a couple things that stand out to me about the film. Well, one, thinking about 2008 and thinking about Obama's election. For me, I think it's important to separate the moment of the election from Obama, the person himself, or even his administration and what happened in the years after. Because I think as the film captures the moment, like that election night, like that, the emotion of that moment became this important touchstone or this important time for reflection for people all over the country in ways where people who didn't necessarily support Obama as a president, who maybe didn't vote for him 4 years later, but whether they loved him or hated him, right? There was this kind of moment of reflection, and so you had these conversations around, are we post-racial? What does this mean? Has our nation moved into this new time? And that conversation or that kind of question was debated, more or less, as I recall, for the coming years. Then we got to, Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and this kind of ever-growing list of names of folks, many of them African-American males, but also females, the Sandra Bland and the Breonna Taylors and others who also have been the victim of police brutality and other kinds of injustice. And I think what that's done is really helped to put that post-racial conversation to rest, to say no, this kind of conception that post-racial meaning, yay, we've gotten past all these problems, the injustices of the past. I'm glad that's over. Now we can move on and, just be, one big happy family. That notion of post-racial, which, believe it or not, was part of the way people were thinking about it. I think, fortunately, we're at a point now, I think, as a nation where, despite a few holdouts like our current president, it's generally understood that that's not the case. And so, that's an important insight, I think, that wasn't always totally clear, as the aftermath of the 2008 election, was happening. So two other things that I'll point to, and then perhaps I'll pass it back to the moderators, or maybe we might ask Mr. Stan FUTCH to jump in here. As a historian, as a history professor at CSUSB, I think about this kind of how history can inform us and motivate us or inspire us. I think there's kind of a hopeful tone at the end of the film, which I think is good, right? It's important to have hope. It's important to kind of keep in mind a certain kind of outlook that will help motivate us and keep us engaged with each other in our communities and doing good things, getting into good trouble, as YVETTE and the late John Lewis would say. So, for me, I think thinking about that long sweep of history and how people have struggled and people have fought and died, and that in many ways I stand on their shoulders, or all of us stand on their shoulders. There's something I can take away from that helps me get up in the morning and keep going. You know, despite whatever depressing stuff's happening in the news right now, despite the disappointments, the setbacks, I know that folks persevered through much worse in the past, just speaking about African Americans. And so there's no excuse for me to slack off. And so, you know, I think that notion of kind of being motivated, being optimistic, I think it's one thing I took away from the film. But also there's my third point is this kind of paradox of we have in our own time period, say, you know, our current era, our current day, the paradox between very high levels of African-American success, right? So we got the Oprah Winfrey's and we got the Barack Obamas and we got, you know, Shonda Rhimes and, you know, all these folks who are doing these incredible things, creative things, artistic things, political, philosophical, you know, with music and entertainment and so forth. There's this fantastic level of success that we see, but then at the same time, we have these persistent kinds of inequalities, right? So the film talked about criminal justice as a big one, but also educational disparities. Also things having to do with, what was the other one they mentioned? It was education, criminal justice. There was another one that I can't remember, I'm sorry. But we have these kind of persistent examples of inequality that we have in our nation, which continue to plague us, particularly as it pertains to African Americans, but also to other groups as well. Voting rights was the other one, right? So the issue of voter ID laws and so forth. So we have to be able to keep both of those things in mind, right? It's not a, you know, well, Barack Obama did it, how come all y'all can't do it? Well, you know, Barack Obama did it and hats off to him. But that doesn't mean that there aren't these ongoing persistent challenges that we also need to be aware of, right? And so as we think about policing in particular in a criminal justice system, for me, it's always important to make sure that we keep in mind there's this wider, more complicated picture where things like schooling, things like jobs and employment, voting rights, you know, housing and healthcare, all these things kind of create a web that then makes the issue of policing so much more difficult or so much more impactful, and so much more important. As you know, it's important to keep this context in mind as we think about the issue of policing. So, of course, I have more thoughts to share, but perhaps I'll pause for a moment. I would like to hear from Mr. Stan FUTCH to say something about kind of the local San Bernardino history, right? So this film was talking about recent events nationally. So if he has any thoughts on kind of what has the last 15, 20 years looked like in San Bernardino and the surrounding communities, that would be really interesting to hear. And so perhaps he can say something about that. And then one other thing before I turn it back over to the moderators, before I forget, let me give a quick plug. Next week for our conversation, we're gonna have a special guest, Alex Vitale, Professor Alex Vitale from Brooklyn College. And he has a recent book called The End of Policing. And so in this book, he has a lot of really interesting things to say about, you know, what should the solution look like in his view, and what does the end of policing look like? So stay tuned for that next week, August 5th, again at 4 p.m. Just wanted to give a plug for that before I forgot. All right, so turn it back over to the moderators, Marlo and Yvette.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robertson. Yeah, one of the main issues, one of the main topics that I took from watching that display was, you know, when the film started, it just brought back that sense of hopelessness that we experienced, especially in the era of Hurricane Katrina. I remember personally feeling helpless at the time that I couldn't do nothing for them, and visually seeing that there was no aid being provided to those people in New Orleans. It just struck me in a sense of, wow, this is America. You know, we could feel helpless at times, but then to visually see it nationally, and you know, and the things that those people had to experience in that time, and again mimic the words of you, Dr. Robinson. You know, so many people have persevered through even greater struggles, and all I can do is mimic that and honor that by fighting even harder as I can, as hard as I can, for as long as I breathe, to set that example for people before and behind me. So, Yvette, I am going to transfer over to you as you bring in Stan Fudge. We definitely would love to hear his historic commentary on the latest in San Bernardino. I know the Westside Action Group had a lot to do with the busing of young Black children to schools when that first started for San Bernardino. So I would love to hear more on that commentary as well. But here we are, Yvette.
I'm actually going to keep it pretty short because I do want to hear from you, Mr. Fudge. But yeah, that was a great film to dive into. I did have a lot of, obviously my own opinions, my own reservations about the way that I perceived it. I know that Mark, you pointed out the sense of hope that you get from it, and this motivation that it gives you. And I do find myself still a little bit caught on the fact that we're doing exactly what you were doing, what the people before us were doing, our parents, our grandparents, Stan, what you were doing here in your community. And I don't think that's to say at all that it's on the fault of anybody who's been doing the work. It's just a frustrating feeling to look at. All of these generations are putting in every bit of sweat and blood and time, their lives, and nobody's listening, at least not in a way that's effective. As they stated in the film, as we stated a little earlier in our conversation, we do see a lot of public media acceptance of the movement and acknowledgement of what's happened, but your paper only goes so far, and it really does not reflect the actions that you are allowing in neighborhoods, the actions that you are mandating in neighborhoods. I'm talking about illegal federal police in states. So please, Stan, we've all been waiting to hear, so please enlighten us.
I'm going to stay at the national level because I think it's so important that we keep this thing big. I mean, that film had so much to say, so much, and they touched on a lot of things that I saw. I remember going back to my father's hometown and seeing our relatives, and he lives in North Carolina. And so the first night we were there, they had a big dinner, and a lot of the relatives came around, and the men and the women were there, and we got to talking. And later in the evening, the South is real different than California is. It's really conservative, and not only white folks, but Black folks are real conservative, real churchgoers and so on. But one of the things I had found out that was just amazing to me was every member of my family had done jail time. And I thought that was kind of strange. I'm like, wow, from major crimes to minor crimes, but they all had jail time. And what I found out was because they had done jail time, they were unable to vote. And because they were unable to vote, what I found was even worse, because the men had this right taken away from them, the women wouldn't go out and vote to embarrass their husbands and their partners. And so you had this, in South Carolina, there's a lot of Blacks. And so you have all these Blacks not voting. And so it segues to what I think we need to do. One of the things we need to do is, number one, we need to vote. We've got to vote. If we want to make changes, we've got to start off by voting. And MARLO knows you got to run for office. Take the big step. Step out there, run for office. And the reason why you run for office is because you can change the laws. You change the laws to reflect what you want in a society. And one of the things I think we need to do that's really big is we need to make a difference, but we need to change the whole theme of what's going on. If you saw from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, you didn't see any change. How depressing. All these years and all these years prior to that, if you watch from the first film to the last film, you would not see any change. So we need to change something. So what we need to change, I think, for a start, is let's not call it, let's go out and battle. Let's not go out there and fight. We're not gonna call it that anymore. We're gonna go say we're going out to get our rights, our due rights. We have rights in this country as an American, and we want our rights. So instead of saying, you know, we go out to the battle, we're going out to the fight, let's do what Spike Lee says. We're gonna go out there and do the right thing to get our rights. We deserve those as human beings. And all of you students and teachers up at Cal State or any college that you're in, you need to demand that your college treat you as they treat every student at the college. From when you go into an administration office to sign up for your classes, don't settle for, I'm sorry, that class is not available, and it's the first day. How's that possible? Well, you know, some students get to pick their classes early, or they did it online, or whatever the reason is. You've got to stand up for your rights. It's the street thing is good, and it brings people, but at the end, you got to make a change, like laws. You've got to change the laws. You've got to change your chancellor's idea on how he treats black folks. Now, he knows that some of the students don't have as much money as some of the white students do, and so there's a dorm there that's not as expensive as the other dorm. Well, it's not so nice as the other dorm either. So at some point, treat me like you treat everybody else. Even though you know I don't have what he has financially, I'm a student. I'm a student up there, and I deserve the same treatment as all the other students do. What WAG does is go out in the community and they truly fight for people's rights. We go around and we try to make things right. And you as students, and you after watching this film, know changes need to be made. And when you have a president like Barack Obama, who, let's face it, he had the power of the House and the presidency, and he could have did so many mean and nasty things like this current president is doing. But he didn't. He did the right thing. And it came back to bite him, because he didn't make a lot of major changes that the Black community needed, because he thought, I can't fight for Blacks alone. I gotta fight for everyone. And he did a great job. But the bottom line is we as Black people, you know, Black Lives Matter. Well, all lives matter. No, all lives matter, like he said, because if we don't say Black Lives Matter, Black lives are not gonna be noticed on that list of lives that matter. And so you need to say Black Lives Matter and be strong about that. But you also need to make changes, run for office, vote for who you think is going to do the best job for our people. We got the election coming up in November, and one of the things RISE is going to do is put on a political forum. And the forum's going to be, who should we vote for when it goes from the president down to judges? Because one of the things that make a big difference in your community are judges. Nobody knows what that judge stands for. There's 5 names on a list, and you got to vote for 2 of them. Or there's 10 names on a list, you got to vote for 5 of them. The people you put in those judgeships are the ones that you're going to face when you break the law, or when you don't break the law, but you want justice. And if you put the wrong person in that seat, you're not going to have the justice that you deserve. So we're going out there trying to get our rights. We're not fighting for our rights. We're trying to get our rights because they're already there. They're on the books. And if the books don't read right, like they do in South North Carolina, where my family is from, then the books are reading where all we got to do is catch you one time and we got your vote. And that's what they do. And so the bottom line is we've got to change the laws. We've got to vote for the right people, put the right people in office so we can move on and do what we're doing, surviving. We've been surviving for years. I mean, come on, we came over here in slave boats. Half the people on the boat got tossed overboard, but the ones that stayed here fought and stayed alive. People tried to escape, they struggled and stayed alive. And here we are today, trying to get the laws to where police officers are held accountable for their actions. That's what we want. Simple things, sound simple, but it's not simple. But if we do it together, and you as students, if you draw your Hispanic, white, Asian, Indian, and all the other students together, you can make a change. Don't do it alone. Reach out. The more people involved, the easier the change to be made becomes. And I thank you every week for your invitation for me to be joining you. And I just think that you've got so much going for you. Our young people have so much going for them. Don't be silent. Just do what you've been doing, but do it just a little bit louder. Thank you.
We thank you. Thank you for joining us and being open to being a part of this panel every week. Your opinion and your knowledge matters to us the most, especially as a community leader who's been here and who's seen the things that our communities have endured, and to be able to offer your perspective. We truly thank you for coming back and being able to speak on these topics. So we are going to get into some Q&A because I see we have a few here.
Before we go into the Q&A, can I
yes.
just a quick word in response to kind of what Yvette had said earlier about a kind of feeling of frustration despite, you know, what I said earlier about being encouraged and so forth. So I think it was a really great point, and I just wanted to acknowledge it on the one hand, kind of as I think Stan also did, and to respond and without taking up too much time, I guess let me just try to say a couple of things in response to Yvette. What I heard you saying is basically seeing this film and seeing the various struggles and thinking about, you know, as Stan was talking about, you know, the slave ships and, you know, 16, 19, and then all the way up until today, there's this feeling of frustration, like, you know, I'm struggling, you know, you as college students, you know, people my age, people, you know, Mr. Futch's age, you know, and goes on back. It feels like we're not getting anywhere, right? And I think that's kind of what I was hearing. So correct me if I'm wrong, Yvette, but that's kind of what I took from what you said. And I think in a way, you're absolutely right. I mean, in a way, I guess the way I think about it is that we have different kinds of dynamics happening at the same time. So on the one hand, there is room to be hopeful, right? There is something about this history to take away and to be motivated. But there's also room to be frustrated and to be angry and to be outraged. And I think being able to give ourselves the emotional permission to feel all of those emotions and perhaps more is completely acceptable. I mean, in a certain sense, if we're going to imagine ourselves as having these rights that Mr. Futch was just talking about, we also have the right to be pissed off. We have the right to be frustrated. Or we have the right to say enough is enough, you know, and why does this keep happening? And so I think there's a kind of indignation or kind of a righteous anger that I think, as I said, I think we should give ourselves permission to feel that. And so in my mind, it's not an either or thing. I mean, the challenge is there's a lot to be discouraged by, and I think there's a very valid, reaction to these ongoing challenges. The way I guess, get myself out of that, I guess it's okay to be angry sometimes, but then after a while, you kind of have to like get back to work. And the way in which I guess I do that for myself is thinking about in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about, how people have struggled. But I also would add, if we think about like how we got to this place, like 2020, like we've gotten here over a period of time that has lasted for hundreds of years, give or take, right? I mean, so just from the end of slavery till today, right? It's 150 years or so. That thinking about that helps me to sort of think about, okay, well, if it took 150 years for us to get this problem, it may take us 150 years to sort of like get a handle on it or begin to dismantle it. And so I remind myself of that when I do start feeling those frustrations and do start feeling discouraged and being like, you know what, the things that are happening right now, I may not see the exact results of the efforts that I'm doing, but I believe that there's going to be results. And there's something encouraging in that. One more quick example, right? So Black Lives Matter as an example, a year ago, I remember having conversations and people were saying Black Lives Matter was dead, or Black Lives Matter it didn't accomplish anything, or, it blew up and it fizzled. Now, of course, no one would say that. Now we're seeing a kind of capturing of the American imagination in the public conversation that would not have been expected in 2020. And I think it's very much because of the kind of work that people like Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors and Opal Tometi and DeRay McKesson and all these other folks were doing 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and putting in work that they didn't know what was going to be the result of it. But wow, look what's happening, and who knows what further good might come of it. And so that kind of the way in which you put in work and sometimes good comes out of it that you don't expect, sometimes it doesn't, but there's always that possibility. I see that possibility in my research on the 1960s. I see those kind of radical possibilities, those exciting possibilities in more recent history like Black Lives Matter. And so I have faith, or I have a belief that those possibilities will continue to exist despite what is justified frustration and anger that we all have to, deal with.
No, thank you. I really appreciate your words. Very encouraging. Also, still very frustrating the amount of time. But I mean, I'm fairly young. There's not too many things I've had to wait for, but this is something I'm very determined to wait for if I do have to wait. But thank you.
Thank you. Another important task is to know your rights. Take the time to educate yourself on your rights and share that knowledge with your family, with your kids. Make sure that they know what they're facing when they walk out the door. We're losing too many of our young people to these situations. So as parents, as leaders, just as civilians, just know your rights. Make sure you take that time to understand that. And another thing I wanted to touch was when we were talking about making sure you run for office and things of such. A lot of people don't take these positions because they don't know where to start. So let me remind you to take interest in your community. Many communities have local organizations and things like that build Black political power itself. So take the chance to take the opportunity to get acquainted with your local NAACP chapter, find your Westside Action Group in your community, you know, things like that, because they are very informative. They keep you in the loop on what's going on, not just in your household, but in your community as a whole, what our community needs as a whole to survive. So definitely take the time to find out what's going on in your community and attach yourself to that, build, and if it's not you, make sure that someone around you wants to take the opportunity to run. It may fit them, and all we could do is rebuild the system. You know, make sure we're voting, or we're in that system helping to achieve what it is we're looking for, which is equality, which is racial, which is justice. You know, so I wanted to add that to that as well. One of the first questions that came in today was actually directed at you, Stan. It says, can you share the challenges the Westside Action Group have taken regarding San Bernardino's government and San Bernardino's police department?
Well, thank you, Aaron, for asking that question. Riverside, I mean, WAG is really in a battle with San Bernardino, because one of the problems with San Bernardino and most cities is the law enforcement does not live in the city. They're not vested in the city. They don't live in the city. And most cities, it's that way. However, the big difference between San Bernardino is San Bernardino has no officers in the higher ranks. They had a lieutenant, and she's now the chief of Riverside Community College. And so she was good enough to be a chief in Riverside, but she wasn't good enough to be a captain in San Bernardino. That's a problem. The numbers of Blacks on their department are very, very low. And so it's a battle we fight every week. Actually, right now, they're getting ready to try to pass a Measure Z, which is supposed to be funding the police department officers. The problem is the way it can be used for a number of things. They've got a mayor who's corrupt. He's got problems. And so we've battled him. WAG has actually asked him for his resignation in a letter. So we have issues like that. And when you talk about whether he's innocent or guilty, we don't know. But at the end, it's costing the city money. They've spent money on for his defense. And that's not the city's money, that's taxpayers' money. And that's an issue. The police department has a chief who was on his last year. And a year before he decided, he took a 5% raise on his last year, where the city manager turned that raise down. And she said, you know, during a time when the city is in such financial straits as San Bernardino, why would I need to take a 5% raise? Well, he didn't. He took the 5% raise. He's going to do one more year, and he's going to retire with a 5% raise in his pocket every year. Does he care about the city? I think he does. Is he trying to do good? I think he is. However, his actions and his department shows that he doesn't really care about us. And that's what the biggest problem with San Bernardino is to me, is they need to go outside, bring in some Black officers, because they have a large number of predominantly Black citizens. And so Black citizens can see the policing from Black officers who may have a little bit more heart, who may be vested just because they're Black, you know? But the bottom line is San Bernardino's got lots of problems, and their problems are a diversity. There's very little. And the city as a whole, as a government, I think it's in better shape now than last election, because I think people are looking for change in the city. The city's in dire straits, and so people are looking for change. Their financial status is in bad shape. They got a lot of things going on, but they were spending money that was frivolous. And so now they're tightening down their strings. I think people are actually trying to make the city better. The city council is trying to make the city better. And with people getting involved, like MARLO was involved, if you get involved then your chances of knowing what's going on and reacting accordingly, in other words, I'm not going to go for that. You're not going to do that. Not in my neighborhood, not over here. If you're not going to do it over there, why do it over here? And so on and so on. And so if you know, like Marlo says, educate yourself to what's going on in the city so you can make the changes that are going on in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. You bet. If you live in a community for 20 plus years, 30 plus years, who knows better than what that community needs than you yourself? So definitely take the time to educate yourself on what's going on, what the city budget looks like, how we're spending money, where could we better put money in better areas to make them prosper, and just always try to find a way. The same way we run our household is how our communities and our cities need to run in order to flourish, in order to make it a safer place for your grandchildren to be raised and to be well educated and to go off and do great things as well. So we always want to continue to reciprocate that matter. We're going to go into the next question, and I think I remember by heart. I didn't pull it up, but it was talking about it's the use of the hashtag Black Lives Matter and how non-people of color take it as an attack. And I guess I could speak on it first as well. I think the only time you could take that term Black Lives Matter as an attack is if you haven't lived in a sense of having to endure the things that the people of color have endured in this country since birth. When it comes to areas of poverty in this country, limited resources to people of color in their community, education restrictions, housing restrictions. When you haven't endured these type of pains, you can never understand what that hashtag truly means when we say it. It's definitely not an attack on anyone. But earlier in the film, someone said that, it was our great brother Cornel West that said, when we say Black Lives Matter, when we invoke all lives matter, a lot of the time we don't get down to the Black population. We don't get down to the people of color. That doesn't trickle all the way down when you say all lives matter. We say Black Lives Matter because we're oftentimes forgotten or put on the back burner for the issues that politics and everything else feel is deemed as more important than. We're always left behind. So when we say Black Lives Matter, that's just a reach on, I love you, you do matter, let's make a difference, let's make a change, let's prosper. So for that to come off as an attack, that only just, puts it into the light of you just haven't endured what many people of color have endured in this country. So take the time to walk in their shoes. And for the people around you in your circles, you always have to never pass up an opportunity when it comes to a learning experience. If someone doesn't feel the same, properly give them that aspect of, hey, let me tell you why Black Lives Matter. So, yes, definitely that.
Can I just say, I often hear in response to this exact same question, I often hear people use the pie example. And if you've spent your entire life with the pie, when somebody tries to take a little bit of it, it feels like obviously somebody's taking something away from you that belongs to you. But I also want to challenge that metaphor, because it also implies that the person who's had the pie their entire life either didn't see or ignored everybody else who didn't have any pie at all. You're telling me you had everything and you didn't notice all of these other people with nothing. And if you did notice, you didn't have the human decency to think they deserved a little bit. And so Yeah, I don't know what to say really as far as how do we convince that other person that it's not an attack on you. But that's what I do have to say about, I guess, the person who perceives it as an attack on them.
Yeah, I think both comments so far have been really insightful. I would add that I guess I'm going to be the hopeful one in the conversation today. I think there is something encouraging to think about how it seems like a lot of our fellow white Americans are getting it. That we can look at opinion polls which show that if you look at white opinion of our African Americans facing unfair policing, you look at the opinion now compared to a year ago or 5 years ago, it seems to be shifting. And what we see in the streets, confirms, is kind of further evidence that suggests that, many of our white fellow Americans, despite they may not have gotten it in the past, seem to be really understanding that Black Lives Matter is not an attack on them. That Black Lives Matter is a legitimate expression of grievances and wrongs that have been suffered, and a call for action to reform and to make it better. And so I think on the one hand, there's something hopeful in that. On the other hand, though, I think there is another segment of our nation who refuses, who basically cling to willful ignorance, right? I think, on some level we have to accept the fact that if they still want to hold on to a certain perception despite all the evidence, I think, Marlo said, people have to be willing to listen and kind of learn from each other. These folks aren't willing to do that. And so I think on some level, that has to be just accepted, and we have to either move on or find another strategy that doesn't depend on convincing them. Because, to use the Kaepernick example, if I'm kneeling and I'm telling you my kneeling means this, and you still think it means something else, or you just disregard the fact that I just told you I'm not kneeling to disrespect the military, I'm kneeling for this reason, and you're like, no, you're not, I don't believe you, then we really can't have a conversation. And I think the similar with Black Lives Matter, where, if some of these people who feel attacked, if they engage with Black communities and they talk to Black folks and they read books and they kind of watch documentaries like we just watched, the information is out there. Like they can kind of enlighten themselves, but they choose not to. And I think that's, so on some level, there's not a whole lot we can do.
This conversation is so important. And again, the reminder on next week's agenda for this web series, when we're talking about the end of police, I think that's going to be, this is a very good segue into next week's conversation, when we'll be meeting with Alex Vitale, giving his insight on what it looks like to end policing in America. I get choked up when we talk about this because, hundreds and hundreds of years have proven nothing's changed for people of color in this nation. Yet we grind every day and we hustle every day to serve and protect each other against a system that swore an oath to protect their citizens. So when we look at someone that I see as myself, like a Sandra Bland, a Black activist who was who was murdered by law enforcement, in the hands of law enforcement, it could be modern day assassination. It can be an attempt to silence someone who's building a reform in their community, or, at what lengths do we see change when they're taking out our great leaders and people who are doing this amount of work in these communities. So, but it doesn't make me afraid to stand up for my community. It definitely doesn't. I just issue to everyone that be vigilant. You know, definitely take that instance to say to yourself why. You know, remind yourself why we're doing what we're doing every day. Why it's important to have this conversation that we're having every week, and just always indulge in what it looks like for the future of you, your family, and your community itself. So, Yvette, you want to take us into the? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Stan. I mean, Mr. Stan.
And you're right. You're on the right track. And one of the reasons why I say you're on the right track is the east side of San Bernardino 2 years ago got a new sergeant that was put in charge of that community. And so, although we accepted her and shook her hand and was glad to see her, we made it clear that, you know, this is a Black community, and you know, we think that we should be represented by a Black office, and just recently a Black officer was put in charge of that community. So make your voice be known to make changes that you want, because if no one had said nothing, change would not have come around. So just make sure you're vocal so people can know that you don't, I mean, thank you, but no thank you. Thank you.
We might have one more question, time for one more question if you all are open. They want to know if the narratives about the United States from the likes of Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King are still valid today. And I actually would like to respond to this one. I think that given a bit of the conversation we've had today, I want to, if not for anything but the sake of Dr. Robinson, I really want to be encouraged by the narratives of Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King, regardless of the present anger that I am sitting in when I do read the news today. Do y'all want to respond to this?
This is Mary Texera. Well, you guys can see that on the screen, I guess. Anyway, we just were bombarded on social media with Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech. And that was given in the 1850s. And I make it a point to read it every 4th of July, or right around that time. And his question is, what is the 4th of July to the Black man? What is independence to the Black man? And I have to say, there is a straight line between his narrative of the 4th of July and the kneeling of Colin Kaepernick, who is, in my estimation, one of our heroes today. Because he did this all by himself, as did Douglass, to an audience of all white people. He's telling them, you can take your 4th of July. I don't want it. It doesn't apply to me. And I think that's what Kaepernick is doing. And we can see the effects of what Kaepernick did, because, Major League Baseball is kneeling now, and all these other sports. And so I think, yes, the question in a roundabout way is yes, they are all as relevant today as they were in the 1850s. We don't have enslaved women hiding in attics to get away from their enslaver, but we sure do have a lot of Black women in prison today, and mostly for nonviolent offenses, as well as, of course, African-American men. We have the distinction in this country of incarcerating more people in prisons, more African-Americans in prisons than were incarcerated at the end of the Civil War. Am I on the right track with that one, Mark? Is that true?
Yeah, more African Americans incarcerated, than there were enslaved. And it was about 400,000 people in slavery in 1865 when the Civil War ended, and we have estimates around 2 million or somewhere around there, Americans in prison and jail and so forth today. So you're right on track with that one. And I would add real quickly, I think the Douglas speech, what does the 4th of July mean to a slave, is a great example. I was thinking about the Martin Luther King speech for Beyond Vietnam, where he talked about how America needs a radical change of its values, and that it needs to particularly think about how it's tied to racism, militarism, and materialism. And I think, those kind of sentiments that we oftentimes don't hear about, but if you actually look and see what was actually said are right there in the records, those things definitely still apply. And I think they continue to challenge us. They continue to express the kind of frustration that Yvette, is embodying in our conversation, as well as the need to continue to press on, as Mr. Futch and as Marlo was also talking about. So I think in many ways, they continue to speak to us in profound ways. And actually, as do many others, right? So there's the, Ida B. Wells and the, Mary McLeod Bethune's and the, so many others who also deserve our attention and our study.
I'm gonna stay positive, Mark. I hope that I can believe in hope, because that's all we have, is the hope that things are gonna change. And I know, Colonel Kaepernick took a knee, but he took more than a knee. He took and sacrificed his entire occupation, something he's been doing since he was a little boy, playing football. All he wanted to do is play football, but he saw this injustice going on, and he took a knee, and it cost him his career. And for that, I applaud him, because, when you're having breakfast, are you the chicken or are you the pig? Well, the pig's giving the bacon, so he's sacrificing his life. The chicken's only giving a couple of eggs, so Kaepernick was the pig. He sacrificed his career, so I applaud him.
Thank you, guys. That about wraps us up for this evening. I do want to leave you guys with some words from Dr. Alex Vitale himself, which is our special guest. August 5th, next Wednesday at 4 p.m. We'll be having a very special episode where we're talking about his book, The End of Policing. So the problem is not police training, police diversity, or police methods. The problem is the dramatic and unprecedented expansions and intensity of policing in the last 40 years, a fundamental shift in the role of police in society. The problem is policing itself. I encourage you all to meet us here next Wednesday, August 5th at 4 p.m. Stan, we'd like to thank you again for joining us once again. You're always welcome, know that. Mark, thank you for the insight. Mary, we love it. My co-host, I can't do this without you, Yvette. Thank you so much. And to you all, thank you for returning, and hopefully we'll see you all next week. Don't forget to share the link, tell a friend. This will be one you will not want to miss, guys. We love you.
Bye, y'all.